Okay, so now the technical issues have maybe kind of been not really fixed. Okay, well, they still can't see the presentation in here, unfortunately. So that is a problem.
By we actually divided them out as well from a generational perspective. And you can see the majority, if you can see the little screen, the majority in the blue, that was our Gen X people. So most people were in that 44 to 59-year-old range. And then it kind of broke out from there. So that's looking at really, and we're going to show you these study demographics versus the study demographics, the current study of looking at the alums, people who actually had already finished the program and had been out for a year or so.
Yeah, so we came up with, we had different, based on the literature, we came up with different areas of focus for the questions, looking at program-related factors for their persistence in their programs, persistence and completion, what were some factors there, relationships, community, Christian faith, and then other factors. And came up with quite a few different different ideas of those things that help people to stay in the program. And again, this first study, they were still in the candidacy, and we had people that were in the program that were in that had been in their program for they were pretty fresh in the dissertation phase, but we had quite a few who were kind of mid-range, like a few years in to many years in. But these the questions, though, we tried to focus in on these areas and to get a sense of, you know, what is it that's keeping you in this thing. Do you want to add anything, Linda? Okay.
Then we seem to notice, like with our, when we looked at responses, how did they respond to the questions that we had? And we try not to really have leading questions, but to really have these focus groups just, and it's interesting because we reached saturation very early when we looked at these people, but then we ended up, we had 82 people that actually responded. We had a lot of focus groups, and we commented even as we got less than halfway through, we're hearing the same things over and over. And some of the coursework components that helped them actually stay engaged, even in the dissertation phase, was the whole issue of discussion boards, small group assignments, groups that they actually formed. Sometimes we didn't form them as faculty members, but they formed their own Facebook groups. Many of the programs, if not all of them, I'd say most, say 98%, had an in-person intensive residency. And that was very interesting because we also, for some of them, with one of the schools, they had phased out the residency, but residency kept coming up over and over and over with those people that we heard about residency, or when we had residency, we really noticed we were really much more together, and that helped our persistence in the program. And then, of course, some special Zoom nights with professors for Q&A or discussion. And then they also talked about the chairs and the committee people being available, approachable, having that regular communication, which we know is important. Huddles, which are groups that just get together. They're kind of, again, those special Zoom nights. And then we asked them questions about their dissertation life balance and, how they were able to focus that, because during the coursework, everything's timed. They have deadlines they have to meet or they don't pass the course. Whereas with the dissertation, it can drag on and on and on to a certain point if they don't set their own boundaries. So they were talking about learning to set their own boundaries and what can you do to help make things work so that you're not feeling like your work-life balance is totally off base.
Sure. I'm going to hand you the microphone so that people at the distance can hear. Okay, here you go.
Okay, so my question is, and my name's Caleb. I'm currently working on my doctoral program at Oral Roberts University in Tulsa. And I was curious, so you talked about, and I totally agree with you, like it's different when you're doing the coursework versus when you're working on your dissertation, because that's where I'm at right now is I'm ABD. And it's not like time like, hey, you only have, a month or whatever to get this assignment done. But how do you guys structure your program at Regent? Is it like, do you do your coursework first and then you jump into your dissertation, or is it mixed at the same time? Because ours is right now, what they do is you start your dissertation basically the second class in, you start that process.
Right. Yeah, so our program, we can speak for the School of Education in particular, that our program starts with full coursework.
Okay.
We tell people to have a mindset of things that you find interesting as
Sure.
you go through, and trends and ideas and
Sure.
so on. But there's no formal there's no formal process for folks to start the dissertation,
Okay.
from the very beginning. And I think that philosophically, we like that approach a little bit better because it takes some of the pressure off, really, of requiring the students to like lock into an idea or a concept, to be committed to something.
Yeah.
We want people to learn. We want them to appreciate the learning that they're having and the experience,
Right.
and the new knowledge that they're gaining, because that may very well help to shift their thinking.
Okay. So what is like the time factor of like, we expect you to be done in how many years? Like ours is like, I know for sure I think it's between 7 and 8 years is what they want you done.
Our program is a 7-year program.
Okay.
People do get extensions, can apply and receive extensions, but typically the coursework phase is between 2 and 2.5 years.
Okay, sure.
Depending on pacing. We have 8-week courses. We encourage people to take 1 8-week course per session. And so
Okay.
we have the semester is divided into 2 sessions, A and B, C and D, and so on. But if they follow that plan and keep going year-round through the summer as well, coursework is done usually within two years or so, and so then there's another 5 years essentially, if you want to look at it that way, for dissertation focused.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah. Okay. Do we want to move on, Linda?
I've already moved the slide.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yes, you have. So, so the responses, again, the responses that we had here is kind of interesting. So, community is very important. And actually, you and I were talking about this before we started, that community is really essential for people to have somebody who knows what they've gone through and what they've experienced and so on. And so that type of community falls under the interactions with doctoral candidates, mentors, whether formal or informal mentors. Our mentoring program, our school has a mentoring program where you can apply for a mentor. And they can help you and so on. But people have informal mentors, people at work or other associates that they know. But we also see that while the community and network support, churches, pastors, family, and so on, can be very helpful and very motivating, it can also be a little bit discouraging because they're asked questions like, are you done with that yet? What's taking so long? And so on. But for people to understand, hey, I need to back off a little bit on my responsibilities. I can't go here right now, or I can't do this. I can't volunteer for that, et cetera. Because I'm working on this, that helps as well. And of course, the Christian faith is very important for our folks. Having that they're called to be there. Prayer life and so on. People really did talk about though wanting that accountability, a need for accountability, to be accountable. To complete their studies, for people to check in and say, how's it going? How are you doing? Do you need any help? People to pitch in and say, you want me to watch your kids for you? Just a variety of different types of supports, different factors. And they also appreciated professors who, again, Christian University, who would pray for them. Whether it's corporately through a huddle meeting, which is a concept that I stole from Linda. And I admit it, but of having Zoom meetings, live Zoom meetings through the semester, and just most of the time, my huddles are generally unscripted, and we just talk about factors related to the dissertation and completing the dissertation. But I will also have folks who have recently completed. Who have defended a proposal or have defended their final defense to come in and talk about the experience a little bit. And that helps people as well to be encouraged by people who have gone before them or who are still in the pipeline. All right, Lynn?
We look at the whole.
Yeah, go ahead.
Was there another question?
No, we're good.
Okay. Then we look at the whole concept of andragogy and moving to heutagogy and really looking at how do we help doctoral candidates move from self-directed to self-determined learning. And that's a real fine line that we're trying to really shift that paradigm so that people can take responsibility. Because as we all know, when you're in coursework, again, as I mentioned earlier, we've got deadlines. There's things that keep us on target. When all of a sudden there's no deadlines and there's nobody saying you need to have chapter 1 to me by April 1st. And then when you don't have somebody doing that, we've really got to be sure that they're very, not just self-directed, but they're very determined that they are going to finish. So what do we do as a professor? What is our role in promoting that heutagogy? And Don, you may want to speak more about this.
Yeah, so really what we need to do is that while the supports are there, and if you look at the visual, you can see the pyramid, and at the base of the pyramid, a great deal of support is needed. And then as you go up, there's less support. And so, for those who are at a distance. So, looking at, pedagogy, your basic education, your basic ideas and so on, generally that's your compulsory education through typically the undergrad experience. Andragogy then, the cultivation part here is, that's where there's more independence, there's more self-resourcing and self-directedness that's happening. And you can see the learner maturity is going up as the pyramid is getting tighter, and the instructor control actually goes from stronger to much less, to where in heutagogy, and ideally what we want our learners to experience, or our candidates to experience, is that they're really driving the thing, and the faculty members are serving as consultants. We're here to resource, we're here to consult, we're here to bounce ideas and so on, but you're driving this thing. Now, we still don't want to see you go down any slippery slopes, and so we're going to try to do our best to support you there. But ultimately, we want to have that heutagogical mindset and that development of our learners. That's really a goal. That's where you go from just engaging in the understanding at the lowest level, maybe some engagement and integration of the knowledge in your kind of a master's program and so on, to a doctoral program where you're becoming an expertise and actually a generator of knowledge. And so that transition is very significant, and that's what we hope to do as we guide our candidates from student to scholar. That's the goal.
One of the things I always tell my students is that it's for those of you that might be musically oriented, the first thing we learn in, say, an orchestra or a band is to play the B flat scale. That's the first basic that we teach students. And then it's going from being able to play that B flat scale to being able to play in the symphony with andragogy, and then to be able to, with heutagogy, being able to write the symphony. So it's having that complete, you're moving up in your skills dramatically.
Great. And so now for the alumni study. So you want to talk about the demographics, Linda?
Or on the alumni study, what we did from the first study, we thought, well, we really need to see what are we doing as an institution to help. How are we really instilling our values and our mission? Are they being really instilled in students in their future life as far as their career goals? So what we did is we looked at our doctoral graduates, and we looked at them from 2018 to 2023. And now we just done this in the last few months, but we wanted to be sure that students had been out of the program for at least a year, if not a little bit more, so that we wanted to see if there was kind of a stick-to-itiveness factor, if that went on through. We had 69 valid online surveys. What we did is we sent out a questionnaire basically through our alumni office, and basically say, could you send this out to everybody that's had degrees conferred between these years? We had 5 schools of study that had this, and we were still looking at online and hybrid programs. So those that might have had that in-person residency as well as online. And we ended up, because we had reached saturation so quickly with our last group and we had so many focus groups, this time we decided to limit it. So from those valid online surveys that we sent out, we had 69 respond. And basically we weeded out anybody that it kind of was, they really didn't fit within the parameters, but somehow they had gotten somewhat of a, like maybe an EDS from the School of Education versus the EDD. So that's not totally the terminal degree. So we would kind of weed those out. So from those 69, we ended up having 33 focus group participants, and we put them within 6 focus groups.
I will say that having the Office of Alumni, the alumni office, to send out the questionnaires was awesome. It was so helpful because they were able to structure a contacts list based upon the parameters that we set. And for the most part, it was very well done. The one snag we found, of course, was School of Education causing trouble with the EDS, with some of those EDS graduates jumping in there. And we'd do the intake form, and it said, when did you graduate? And a few people said not yet, or 2025, and it's like, okay, wait a minute, something's not right here. But that was a small kink. We can see here that the distribution of male to female, we had, of course, 12 males and 21 females. So there was actually a little bit greater percentage-wise participation of males than in our persistence study.
Looking at our age
Yeah,
groupings,
generational thing, that's Linda's research, definitely. And so, go ahead, yeah.
generationally, that kind of laid out as well. You still had more Gen X, and part of that's the age, 44 to 59. People don't, well, we are seeing more and more millennials in that 28 to 43 category that are coming into the program. And I've even now, as I've continued the generational research for over 800, last I looked the other day, it was 849 people that I've looked at. And we now are starting to get even some Gen Zs. Not very many, I've only had 4, but still they're coming in as well into the doctoral program. They're going straight from degree to degree to degree. And but we find that those who actually have a little bit of experience in between, they really thrive because they're able to have applicable principles right away. Degree format, basically 10 of the 38 said they did it completely online, fully online, no in-person residency at all. 23 said that they had some in-person elements, and that would be some type of on-campus residency or even a virtual residency. But residency always keeps coming up. It's very interesting, and we don't have that in our questions, but they mention it because
Question.
it really has this cohesiveness where they're able to bond with other students, and because as Don said earlier, a lot of times the community aspect, you typically go through the program and a lot of times you'll feel very isolated because especially if you do an online program, you feel like you're out there all by yourself and nobody understands. Your family's there to support you. Your kids are great. Your kids are wonderful and they're helping you and they're seeing you study. It's a great modeling for them. But at the same time, they don't totally understand. You can't really talk to them. So you can, but you can't. They haven't been through it. Unless somebody's been through it, they don't totally understand. So it was interesting that those that had residency really, like I said, pumped that up. And then others said, gee, I wish I would have. And that's something that we're even going back to look at as a school because we've removed it.
And yeah, that's the point I was going to say, Linda, is that it bubbled up organically. And when those who had not had any residency heard about it, they were like, oh my gosh, what a great idea. Why didn't we have that in our program? So that was very
It's easy when
interesting.
you go through. I always tell my students, be sure you get a dissertation buddy. You may end up not
Yeah.
staying on the exact same path as far as at the same chapter at the same time, but at least you have somebody there that knows exactly what you're going through. Then we look at our schools of study again. We weaned it down to 5. We did it by schools rather than by degrees. The last study we did by degrees. And you can see SBL is School of Business and Leadership, Comm Communications, School of Divinity, School of Education, and School of Psychology and Counseling. And you can see the numbers are smaller, but you'll see we have more in the School of Education, mainly because they knew us. So when our names went on it, you typically will go, oh, I trust those people. Let me go ahead and jump in their study.
Yeah, the ones from SOE that didn't participate knew me. But anyway, So when we're looking at, we did mention, by the way, that we had a 5-year span of when the degrees were conferred, and that we really wanted to, get to the point to where we could, take a look at people who are still recent graduates, but not too recent. And it's interesting that we had, between 2020 and 2021, our COVID group, we had quite a few who jumped in 2021 and even 2022. Which was really interesting because we did gain some perspectives, from them based on that experience.
Then we looked at our interview questions about the kinds of things we were looking for, because our whole point was to determine the impact of our institution's core values. And our core values are innovation, integrity, excellence, and or excellence, innovation, integrity, in that order. But then our motto is Christian, because we are a Christian-based institution. Our motto is Christian leadership to change the world. So we were really interested to see, do those values and does that motto, does that transport into their, as I mentioned, their future career? Now, some people stay in the same career, but they might move up. For instance, I know I've had a student who, over the course of her doctoral degree, started as a special education teacher, went on up the ranks in the school system, and then is now an executive vice president of a junior college. So over time, she's really gone through a lot of different changes, transitional changes in regards to her career, but yet, do those core values, do they continue to impact your life? Are we instilling those? Even if we don't really talk about them directly, we do talk about our motto a lot, but we don't always talk about our the excellence, innovation, integrity. We model that a lot, which you'll begin to see in some of the comments that they make.
Right.
But again, we were looking at the 5 areas that you see on the left about the lifelong influence and impact of those values in the model. Has there been any spiritual transformation that's carried forth? What about the professional impact? And then we asked for examples, very specific. We wanted examples from what they did. And then were there any value building relationships? And hey, did we miss anything as an institution that we need to put back in? And then we had various emerging themes.
Yeah, so the emerging themes that came out, and we have some associated quotes here because we felt that they really helped to exemplify what the students were talking about, and what the impact was, rather the alums, what the impact was on them. So the integration of faith and learning influenced the growth as Christian leaders, and you can see SOD, a School of Divinity, really heightened my sense of clarity, understanding, and knowledge so I can be a leader in the church. Excellence in all areas was emphasized, was another thing that came up, and that was also interesting to see because this, and we actually had a School of Education quote here, a 2019 alum, that there was an emphasis on excellence, and they did appreciate that, and then the integration of character traits and technical skills led to effective leadership and strategic thinking. And that is very important. Of course, it was an SBL person that said business and leadership, strategic thinking. I like to think of that as representing some critical thinking, which could be across the curriculum and across the schools. And that's something that we definitely want to see more and more of, and we want people to exemplify those skills.
And we asked them about, because we were a Christian institution, we asked them about spiritual transformation. Did they have any? Was there a purposeful integration of faith and learning? That came up. It was. And someone said in the School of Education, after my training, I had a deeper understanding of my faith and how to use that in my work life. And then did you have support? They emphasized as well that they had support from professors as well as peers through prayer, and that just the reinforcement of a biblical worldview. And that's one of our first initial courses is Christian Worldview for Educators. That's in the School of Education. And then the whole concept of training as servant leaders. And, we've been talking about servant leadership isn't all a Christian concept. People talk about servant leadership in Greenleaf's early work, and that was based upon Hermann Hesse. So, but people knew that they would get a quality education. So one in the School of Psychology and Counseling said, I chose Regent because I knew it would be a quality education as well as an integration of my faith. And another in School of Education said there was a tremendous spiritual deposit. And I think that is one of the reasons why I chose Regent.
Yeah, and then so looking at professional impact, because of course, obviously, there is the vocational aspect of it, and the, you can see purposeful engagement from professors encourages this value to be carried forward. That, we really find, and in talking with some folks earlier, that engaging folks, particularly in the online environment, is so important to really generate to generate a sense of belonging and so on. And you see, it's how I act, and I believe that people notice I'm Christian, need to act in a way that is consistent with my values, and so really living those values out. Then a cultivation for human connection with the academic environment. Again, that was really interesting to see. Being professional example as a professional example, and it says I think in the professional setting, I am trying to approach everything with my all and give it excellence, and then the integrity and excellence are paramount as representatives of Christ. And we were happy to see that integrity, excellence, that they really embrace those ideas, and feel like that is part really of the calling that they have as a Christian leader. And so then this was interesting that I had to personalize the Christian motto, Christian leadership to change the world, one conversation at a time. And so I thought that was really interesting, that it was purposeful, that they felt the responsibility of being a Christian leader to change the world one conversation at a time, whether it's one-on-one or talking to a complete stranger. Anyway, it's very interesting.
The other was the whole concept of value building relationships, and those relationships that really provide encouragement, understanding, and collaboration. And you can see from the list, professors, the cohort, the group that started, family, colleagues, church, community. And as you can see from the comments on the right side, I felt all of my professors really modeled and lived the work and the core values that Region espouses. And that was one of the things I think really was encouraging, is because that's one of the things, and I mentioned we don't always go around and talk about excellence, innovation, and integrity, but you can see that's continually being pulled out in the comments, mainly because we do our best to model that. And so by having someone come back and say that we modeled and lived the work and the core values that Region espouses, that was very encouraging. And another said, I felt very supported by the Regent community, our cohort, and the cohorts ahead and behind us as well, from my professional people. And now what that person could very well be is that we didn't phase out our residency till really after COVID. We had a virtual residency during COVID, and then we kind of phased it out after that. So this person that finished in 2021 had obviously had an in-person, face-to-face residency. And so when they talk about the cohorts ahead and behind, we had structured times when they would get together with people ahead and behind, and they would be able to share with one another this is what you need to look forward to. This is where, these are where let me help you put up your guardrails. And so people would get real excited about that. And then they would be able to say, especially if they were kind of sandwiched in between, we would have 3 different levels, the people that came in initially, the middle people, and it's kind of like the middle schoolers and then the high schoolers, the ones that were ready to go on to the dissertation phase. And so the middle people and the high schoolers, so to speak, they would be able to help those that were just starting and say, you can do this. And they would be very encouraging. So I think that that's good. And I think it's interesting, some person in the School of Psychology and Counseling said, throughout the program, I met some really intelligent people that pushed me to think deeper. And that's not always talking about professors. That's talking about their colleagues that they're learning about, because we have people from all walks of life that come in, and it's good that we're able to help push those critical thinking skills even amongst themselves, not just as faculty members. And again, that's moving from that andragogy to the heutagogy model of trying to push it so that they're reinforcing these concepts within themselves. And that's what we're trying to do, to develop the critical thinking skills so that they can compose that symphony, so to speak. And then again, someone else in the School of Education said, I feel like we all think differently, and that the innovation and excellence that so many of the students in the program displayed as we interacted just really was inspiring to me. And that's encouraging too, to hear that they inspired one another. So those relationships were very value building.
And I think that specifically pointing out the innovation, the excellence here, but the motto, somebody really wrapped that up and said, yeah, for me it was the innovation, the excellence, but not only that, but the motto, which drew me to Regent. That's why I chose Regent. And we like to see that and appreciate that, because I think oftentimes when we talk about, well, we tend to be very compartmentalized as humans, and so we have a work life, we have a family life, we have a church life, we have a school life, and we really, I know in the School of Education, but I think it's very much the same in the other schools across the university. We really try to purposely integrate the Christian principles and Christian ideas um, into the curriculum to show that they're all linked and they're all integrated. And so it's very interesting to see this. And Linda, I would say that a lot of the groups, I think we saw that in all the groups, didn't we, where they really
Yes.
affirmed that they had seen that they appreciated all aspects of the mission, the vision, and our guiding principles. And they seemed very satisfied with that, which was good.
That's one of the reasons we even did this study, because so many institutions, we just assume that we have a mission, we have values, but are they really infused in what we do? And then do they internalize that? Or is it just something that's nice to put on a piece of paper? It's just, for example, like critical thinking skills. I remember when I was in the public school system, everything had critical thinking skills in it. But when I look back after I was away for a little while, I really questioned, did we really infuse those critical thinking skills to the way which we really needed to do? Or was it just nice to put on paper because that's what everybody wanted to see? And that's what we kind of wanted to do with this, is to see, were we, were we living up to this? And was there something that we needed to change? So some summative thoughts, and this kind of captures it, that doctoral alumni noted the strong community and mentorship from faculty, when combined with the integration of biblical principles and academic excellence, will produce Christian world changers. These elements combine to build holistic, servant leaders who impact the world for Christ through their prospective careers and community endeavors. And that kind of just summed it all up as far as what we kind of found. And we were glad to hear the results were we didn't you kind of went in with hopeful expectations, but you certainly didn't lead the people to say what they did. So anyway, that's kind of our summative thoughts.
Mhm.
One last quote: I think what I experienced from Regent was when we are really intentional about our mission and who we are, that is attractive to others. And that was a School of Education student. So I guess we need to just open it up for Q&A.
Yeah, definitely. If you want to stop the share, then we can look at you on the screen again.
Absolutely.
All right, well, maybe just look at me. I don't know. I don't know why it's just doing that. Anyway,
I've seen myself. You don't see me. Okay, that's fine.
okay, yeah, anyway. So do you have any questions about the study, about what we found, about how we went about it, how they feed into one another? And it's fine if you don't.
I got a question.
Sure.
I mean, so when you guys you talked about that COVID time period, you saw a big jump from graduates, 2021, 22, 23. Was there any other factors? Did you guys change anything with your model, or how you went about doing it? Like you said, like the huddle groups or things, was that implemented kind of in that time frame that may have contributed to more people going through the program?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So that screen was showing the number of participants when they graduated. And so we just had greater representation during the COVID years. But a few people did say, and tell me if I'm wrong, Linda, I do recall hearing that, COVID gave them an opportunity to really focus on their studies and so on. Now, I know for myself as a professor, I engaged a lot more with my students. I was very intentional with engaging, because the courses continued.
Right.
They did not stop. And so my engagement, I upped it a little bit more where I'd actually send out weekly notes of encouragement, short videos and things like that. I've always done video announcements, but, I would do, short videos to just say, look, this is a hard time. We know it's a hard time for you. We had people many are in public school settings, and so they were, their work world was being rocked, and really, I guess the school world, their degree seeking world, was a little bit more consistent because it really hadn't changed much. But I know that a couple of people talked about how they did use COVID during that time to finish up their study. Any thoughts on that, Linda?
They did, and I asked something about the huddles. I started the huddles a long time before that, so that wasn't something new. That was just because of COVID. I actually started that before that. But like Don said, they might have been more frequent during that time because they just needed that encouragement.
Yeah.
Or there's the phone calls, so often we don't just say, okay, we're going to meet monthly with huddles. I meet with my students on a Tuesday. It's not always a specific Tuesday. I kind of look at my schedule and see, and we do it on Tuesdays from 6 to whenever. And usually, it can be anywhere from a half an hour to an hour, depending on how much they want to talk and how many people show up. So, but even though we did that, like he said, we would also make phone calls to students to say, hey, how are you doing? Are you okay? Anybody in your family sick? Or what can I do to help encourage you to keep going or to get going? Because there's always going to be those that we still have that problem. I've been doing this for 24. This is my 24th year, and you always have students that'll ghost you, that won't participate. But then the ones who do, they're the ones who actually finish because they have they have that relationship, and they feel that accountability, not just with me, but with others that are around them as well.
Any other questions? All right. Well, look, we appreciate you guys being here. Thanks, Linda, for joining in from Virginia Beach.
Sorry we had so many technological problems.
I know. Gosh, what a bummer that was. But
We
thank you all
tried.
for
We
showing
tried
up.
ahead of time too.